Welcome to Making Zinfandel Part 2.
I'm Greg.
I'm Julie, and we're the Crafty Winers.
So you might notice that we have 2 gallons of Zinfandel now, and we started with 1 gallon. You might be wondering how.
We made it multiply.
Yes.
We're like Jesus.
So we started this on the 2nd of May. On the 5th of May, it looked fine. On the 9th of May, it started looking a little bit slow. And on the 12th of May, it was apparent that it was completely stalled.
It was our problem child.
The specific gravity when it stalled was 1.025. So it was really sweet. It had a lot of sugar in it. There was no way we could let it sit at that. The initial gravity was 1.124. So when it stalled, it was around 13% alcohol, which some of you experienced people know that can be a problem to restart. So I did try and did a yeast care package, put EC 1118 yeast in it with some fermento and yeast holes, and it started bubbling a little, and then it stalled again like 2 days later. So at this point we had a high ABV failure that was going to be too sweet to drink.
Yeah, it was really sweet.
So rather than hide this from you, we decided that we would use this as a learning experience. We've done it several times before, quite a few times. In fact, we're doing it right now with a Chardonnay. The technique is to split it into 2 batches, which halves the ABV and gets it down to an ABV that is low enough that it should successfully restart. We've always had issues with restarts when it's over 10% alcohol. So it's good to get it down below 10%, and you'll have a lot more chance trying to restart it, pitch yeast, give it a yeast care package or whatever. So that's what we did. We had another 1 gallon concentrate of Zinfandel. So we
started a new batch.
We mixed up a brand new batch of Zinfandel and got the pH right, got the sugar content to basically the same as what our stalled batch was. It had the same initial gravity as our stalled batch. And then we split that equally into each one of these fermenters. And then we split the stalled batch into each one of these equally, so that we ended up with 2 1 gallons of half stall and half new. That cut the ABV down to 6.48%. That happened on the 14th of May. 15th of May, it looked good. It had just gotten its start. 17th of May, it was going fairly furiously. And long story short, on the 28th of May, it went dry. Both batches went exactly 1.000. So they're done. Our restart worked after splitting it into 2 batches. And this is a good technique anytime you have a stubborn stall. If you can't get it to restart by just pitching the yeast and giving it some yeast holes, or a yeast care package that we'll link, good technique is to split it into 2 so that you have the ABV. Do the regular checks that you would normally do in our yeast care package video, actually. Make sure that your pH is still between 4 and 6. Make sure that you didn't introduce something to it that the yeast wouldn't like maybe chlorinated water. If so, it may be a little bit more difficult, although having the chlorinated water probably is a good technique as well. You may be able to get that to restart as well.
I still kind of like my version of the story better, that we made it multiply.
If you could do that, you would be more popular than you already are.
That's the next video. How to multiply your wine.
Turn your water into wine or whatever.
Yeah.
Better not go down that road. So we do have, if you've been watching our videos, we've introduced tools on craftywiners.com/tools. One of those is an ABV calculator. But to be honest, calculating the ABV after splitting it and introducing a new batch isn't going to be terribly accurate. But it's going to be around 13% that we ended at. So check out our tools, because the ABV calculator is great, but it's normally going to be good when you have an initial gravity and a final gravity and not an initial gravity, then another initial gravity, then a final gravity, and another final gravity, it's going to be difficult to come up with an accurate ABV after you split and add new unfermented with a slightly different initial gravity. So check out our tools, but we're not going to do that here because it's not going to be accurate anyway.
We're just gonna guess and say 13.
We can probably get a pretty good idea just by tasting it too. So
True. We haven't tasted it.
I think we're going to fix that.
I think so.
We are drinking our Pinot today.
Pinot Noir.
So you can tell the color is a little different than the Merlots that we usually drink.
It's really good too. If you haven't watched that video, I suggest you do.
So we're only going to show you part 2 using one of these 2 gallons. The other one we'll do off camera probably tonight or tomorrow. But I'm going to go ahead and clear that out of the way, and we'll get started with racking. I should say, as far as the stall is concerned, sometimes it just doesn't make sense why a stall happens. You do something the exact same way 15 times, and one time it stalls. Most of the time you're just not going to probably know if you don't find something obviously wrong. Temperature is good, pH is good, not chlorinated water. Sometimes I think
Too much sugar?
Or not enough sugar.
Too much sugar or not enough sugar?
Too much sugar or not enough sugar could be another reason. There are several reasons. Most of those are going to be in our yeast care package video.
Well, and the yeast itself sometimes is different. You can get bad yeast.
Well, it wouldn't start in that case normally.
That's true.
So I don't know, but sometimes I just think they just go on strike and decide that they're just not going to work anymore.
Yeast on strike?
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and start racking this. Okay, so at the end I tip it to try to get as much of it as possible. And earlier we were using this same auto siphon on cider, so cider that didn't have any lees, so the cap is off the bottom of the auto siphon.
And I didn't put it back on.
So it's a lot easier to suck up the lees when the cap isn't on. Everything has been sanitized. It's the very first step. We have a bucket of sanitizer that's still mixed up. Everything goes through it. Anything that's going to touch the wine.
Including our hands.
Including our hands.
AKA the dryness that I'm seeing right here.
Okay, that's pretty close to all I'm going to be able to get with that lease.
There's a dog under my foot.
Dog.
I was gonna smush her.
Okay, so normally we don't do this up on the counter, but for the videos we do, so this gets a little awkward. Trying to not take a bath.
We're getting better at not bathing ourselves in it, though.
I'm going to clear this stuff off, and we'll proceed. Got a little more room to work with. I didn't mention anything about our cool little fermenter. They're much cheaper than little Big Mouth bubblers. Yeah. I'll link that in the description below in case you're interested in that.
They're nice too because they have like 2 lids. There's a plastic one that goes on here, and then the screw-on lid.
Rubber. Yeah, it's more airtight than the bubblers are.
And they don't leak as much.
They're cheaper. And you can get them on Amazon, which sometimes is a problem with the little Big Mouth bubblers. So, okay.
So I like to do a little investigating, or I do some research on the grapes and the history of the wines that we're making. And I actually stumbled across Zinfandel grapes have been widely said to be American grapes, but they are actually from Croatia, I learned, which was not something I knew. But in my little research, I found out something that was kind of interesting that kind of pertains to our stall. In 1970, white Zinfandel was accidentally created because they were doing a batch of Zinfandel and it stalled. So they were pretty sure that they were just going to have to throw out all that wine, and they tasted it and realized that the fermentation process stopping had given it a nice sweet flavor and took all the bitterness out of it. So they started making white Zinfandel after that.
And they could have just split it into 2 batches.
But now we have 2 wines because of it. So sometimes a stall can be a good thing. Anyway, that's my history lesson.
I feel so much smarter. We
Okay.
don't have any headroom, and this is going to be because of the split. We're not going to have room to put most of our stuff in there, so I vote we
We
drink a
taste
little
it.
bit of it to get some of that
We
headroom
haven't
down.
tasted it, so that's perfect.
And normally you don't want headroom, but this is too little because we're not
We
going
gotta
to get
put.
our oak in,
Yeah, we gotta put
and
the
we're going to
milk
be
in.
splashing out as we're stirring. So we'll fix
Here,
that by
give me a
drinking
cup.
it. And it's not going to taste great because of the youngness.
And it has no oak yet. I'm
Were
making a
it not
mess.
were it not for the fact that we're drinking another wine, I think we could get a better idea of the ABV, but
It's true.
I can taste the alcohol, so it's going to be more than probably 11% for me to taste it this strongly.
It's
And
good.
I do guess that it's around 13.
I'd say, yeah, 12, 13, somewhere in there.
It is
But it
good.
tastes good.
It'll be a lot better after it's oaked.
It'll definitely be better. We kind of like our Zinfandels a little on the oaky side.
And I mean, honestly, it was almost sickeningly sweet when it stalled. It just was not good. So at that point, if you can't figure out a way to get it restarted, yeah,
Then you have white Zinfandel, except for it's red.
yeah, we could carbonate it, force carbonate it,
So you could.
and possibly naturally carbonate it.
So now I am going to add all of our additives here, and I'll preface this all by saying this is completely optional. But this is what we use. We use chiasosol, chitosan, bentonite, potassium sorbate, and potassium metabisulfate. And we put in the chiasosol first, and we'll let it sit for an hour before we add all the rest of the ingredients.
Chiasosol is going to work on the positively charged particles. Its partner is chitosan, and it works on the negatively charged particles. So if you put them in both at the same time, they can work against each other. So you want to give one time to work before the other gets added. Preferably.
And we will put up the measurements of all of these, just in the interest of saving some time.
We might magically make a stainless steel spoon appear in frame.
Ta-da!
If you watched our older videos, we used a silicone spoon for a long time, but although it seemed like it was a solid body spoon,
Turned out it
it
wasn't.
wasn't. And it would get stuff trapped in it that wouldn't come out until after you turn it upside down or something. And yeah, I would recommend a spoon that doesn't have any compartments.
Silicone's fine, just needs to be one piece.
Needs to be one piece. No cracks or holes for stuff to get into and later come out. Okay, so we are going to give that as much time as we can, given our recording schedule, up to an hour, and then we will come back and add the other ingredients.
Okay, so I have added all of our other ingredients and mixed it up real good and a little bit of the wine. And then I will add it to this.
Now that we've waited our hour,
I will add it to this. And probably we'll have to rinse the bentonite out of there.
so we're using these little containers. We have labels on the back that have the shortened version of the name of what it is and then the measurement for a gallon, and it makes it real easy to know how much to put in without having to go look at a list or commit it to memory.
And they're so much easier to deal with than all of the different packaging types.
We let these get empty before we put more in to handle the expiration dates or something getting extremely old, even if it doesn't expire. Always stir very gently because you don't want to introduce oxygen at this stage. Okay, now we get to do our favorite part of the whole video.
That was sarcasm.
We're going to check our pH. pH at this particular stage isn't important, but the pH prior to bottling is, and we like to do it now, at least a good portion of the adjustment, so that there's time for whatever ingredient we may have to add to adjust the pH to fall down to the bottom and get racked off when we bottle. It's 5.09, which is very high. We want the pH before bottling to be between 3.3 and 3.8 for red wine. Okay, we got it down to mid-4s on the pH, and we're going to stop there, and we'll deal with the rest of it when we get closer to bottling.
So now, oak.
Oak. Zinfandel is going to need quite a bit of oak.
Well, I mean, according to your taste, some people don't like as much oak.
We like our Zinfandel's oaky. So we measured out 0.5 ounces of oak cubes, and that's a good measurement to use for a gallon. And then probably about a week is when we'll start seeing the oak flavor coming through. But you may want to use more or less oak or more or less thyme. Usually our Merlots will sit on oak for 2 weeks total, and this probably will be similar. But again, you can use more or less oak, but this is a good starting point. About half an ounce per gallon.
We'll taste it in 2 weeks and see what we think. Sometimes we add more.
This oak has been sterilized. Put it in the oven on a baking sheet at 220 for about 10 minutes. That'll kill any bugs. We always do that out of the package. We also do that after we use it. We'll reuse the same oak cubes 3 times or so, but you have to keep track on your batch notes of how many times they've been used, and then when you put them away, put them in a bag and indicate that they've been used a certain number of times so that you can track that 3 times usage. These oak cubes are unused, and if they are unused, we usually don't actually mark it on our note. We'll only mark it on the note if it's been used before. So now, put a lid on. There's not enough headroom here to mess with. Otherwise, I could have used marbles, food-safe marbles. I could have maybe added another Zinfandel to it to top it off. You don't want there to be any more than maybe half an inch room at the top. You don't want it to be too close to the top either, or it will bubble out if the temperature changes. We'll put a airlock on this and put it in our fermenting room, and probably check it once a week or so to see if the oak taste is where we want it. And when it is, we'll bottle it. So you can watch our bottling video to see that process. It's the same for Zinfandel and Cab and Merlot and white wines. So there is no Zinfandel Part 3. This is the end of the line for the Zinfandel series.
Sorry.
We would normally use our food saver to degas this, but because of the fact that this was a restall and we were waiting for a filming day, it's been degassing, and it is very well degassed, and it's going to sit for another 2 weeks before we bottle it. So we will probably run the food saver on this on bottling day just to make sure there is no CO2 in this at all. But when we tasted it, I didn't taste any CO2, and we can tell just by the color. It's very dark. You can see CO2 usually, at least to an extent. It'll be kind of a glowing color. It's letting more light through. And this is dark as night, so we're going to skip the degassing.
Thank you guys for watching Zinfandel Part 2. I hope you liked the video. If you did, click like, make comments, ask questions. We will respond. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you for your support. Till next time, cheers.